Good morning. Welcome to Daylight with Dean, number 68 on June 18th, 2020. It is a beautiful morning, just getting started, and I'd like to start it with my first sip of coffee of the morning. My first 3 sips of coffee of the morning. Great to be with you this morning. We made it home from our trip from Michigan without incident. You will notice that I still don't have my microphone, so if the sound still is a little hollow or echoey, just be patient. We will get that taken care of. Also, my lighting is a little different. My overhead light stopped working this morning, so I have to tend to that and get that fixed as well. I am so glad to be with you today and grateful that you are here. Had a great trip to Michigan. It was a whirlwind of a trip. Had a great time with Leslie's niece and her fiance, and what a great surprise of a day that was. We had been texting back and forth. They don't have good cell coverage up where they are in northern Michigan, and we've been texting back and forth and trying to kind of nail down where we were going, because they live near Mackinac Bridge, and then they live somewhere in northern Michigan, but they were an hour and a half away visiting his best friend's parents. So they had a couple-day break, Aquilin and Dominic, and so they went and stayed with his best friend's parents and in their cottage. And so when they heard we were coming up, they insisted that we come there with them. And so we went there, met them in this cute little town, and rode just a few minutes away to the cottage, which was a magnificent house in the woods. And that was a lot of fun. And then they insisted on taking us on their boat on a lake. And when we told my sister, who lives in Michigan, where we were going, she was like, I bet I know the lake you're going to. And I said, well, how would you know the lake I'm going to? It's 3.5 hours away. She goes, if that's where you are at, most likely you're going to Torch Lake. And then she paused and she said, Torch Lake is magnificently beautiful. She said, I've never been there, but I've been told it is spectacular. I've been told it's one of the top 10 lakes in the country, or something along those lines. And I was like, wow. So after lunch, they took us just a few minutes away to their boat that was docked. And it's a shame to call it a boat. It was more like a living room that floated. I mean, it had, it was a pontoon boat. It had couches the whole way around. The most comfortable thing you'd ever want to spend an afternoon on a lake. And he took us out on this lake, and the water was crystal clear, like Caribbean Ocean, crystal clear. And I was like, and he was driving us, and it's enormous. It's like a 20-mile lake, and you could just faintly see the hills around the edges the whole way around it. And it was otherworldly. I mean, it was just like, where am I? And so I mentioned to Buddy, the boat owner, our host, I heard this lake was a fairly impressive lake and was ranked real high up. And he said years ago, National Geographic ranked it one of the top 5 lakes in the world. Now, I don't know how you rank as one of the top 5 lakes in the world. I just know the water was crystal clear. Uh, the scenery surrounding it was spectacular, and I'm sitting there feeling like Forrest Gump. Like, how did I end up on this boat, one of the most beautiful lakes in the world, on a Tuesday afternoon, a week after, on a Tuesday afternoon, I was in Deep Creek, Maryland, in that lake. And I'm just like, what is going on? It was phenomenal. And getting to take my daughter and my grandson on the boat and watching my grandson just enjoy being on the boat. It was a great trip. So we were invited to spend the night Tuesday night, and we contemplated it, but that was 3 hours further from home than my sister's. We would have had about a 10-hour driving day yesterday, so we elected to come home to my sister's near Detroit in Clarkston, Michigan on Tuesday evening. Got there right at 10 o'clock, and then packed up and loaded up and came home yesterday and got home a little before 6 o'clock. So that was our adventure. What a nice time it was. So thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your prayers. One of the true highlights for me on the trip was just spending time with my sister. Don't get to spend enough time with her and her husband Keith. Hadn't seen them since Christmas time, I believe, and it was delightful. It was delightful. And the daylight that we shared yesterday was just tapped into something very significant. So if you haven't seen Daylight number 67 on June 17th, I want to invite you to check it out. It was something. It was really helpful, really good, really encouraging. And we talked about just the dreams that God places in your heart, and how moving toward fulfilling those dreams, you can't wait till you have it all figured out, all mapped out. At least in our experience, we haven't had that luxury. We just feel like we don't know what we're doing, and we take that next step and that next step and that next step. And I just want to talk real quick when your dreams and God's dreams don't quite match up. When your dreams for your life and the Lord's dreams for your life don't quite match up, and you know it, I'd invite you to do the really hard work of whittling down to what it is that is keeping you from embracing what God is calling you to do with your life. It's not a fun journey to go on. It's not an easy journey to go on, but it is a well worth journey to go on. Many of you know that I felt called to be a pastor very early in my life. A little kid, had a conversation with my mom about it that Tarla and I mentioned 2 days ago. And then as a teenager, my principal asked me if I wanted to curtail my Christian high school education toward the ministry, and I said yes. So I took a lot of New Testament survey classes, Old Testament survey classes, a lot of really good classes that just gave me depth and understanding of the Lord's Word. And I went to Liberty, and then I went to Liberty, and I just didn't feel like I fit. I felt like a fish out of water. It was of a different denomination than I was as far as church goes, so that felt a little off. And then all the other pastoral ministry majors, man, I just didn't feel like I fit in. And maybe they felt the same way, I don't know. But I really wrestled with my calling through college, saying, I don't think I can't quite figure this out. It feels like I'm trying to put on Saul's armor to do what I'm being called to do as David, and really wrestled with that. And so I just kind of ran. I didn't, other than my uncle who was a pastor when I was a kid, I didn't really have a lot of pastors in my life that I could look at and say, well, I want to be just like that pastor. I want to just be like that. None of them seemed to be able to match up with what my life might look like as a pastor. And I just, wow. And I mentioned yesterday, I was terrified of my kids growing up and hating God, hating the church, being resentful, because church people can be pretty brutal on pastors' kids, and expectations and projecting on them what they, all of that. So I was just like, I just don't know. So, I tried it for 10 months out of college, and it was in an area of the country that didn't quite fit me, and I was away from home. I was very immature, had a whole lot of growing up to do. And so I just ran, and I moved back home in the summer of '89, and I knew that I loved diving for golf balls, and I just prayed, God, let me do this. Let me do this. So from '89 to 1996, I had Dean's Diving Service, and I loved it. I was running down a dream, baby. I was pursuing that dream. I wanted to get to where my company was pulling out over 1 million golf balls a year, and we reached that goal. We were diving 150 courses in a 5-hour radius of Pittsburgh. In the summertime, had 11 people on payroll, high school and college kids. It was great. I was on a different golf course outside every day, not tied down to an office, not sitting behind a desk. Loved it. And then we had Zoe, and my wife said, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I'm like, golf balls, baby. This is it. I'm going to be not only the golf ball king of Pennsylvania, I'm going to be the used golf ball king of the world. I just had these dreams. And when I said it, the Spirit just whispered, are you sure? Are you sure you want to dedicate the rest of your life pulling 2-inch round plastic spheres of scrap rubber out of lakes and ponds? Are you sure? And until then, I was sure. But that little whisper, that little voice, like who I thought I was. And then that just led to a 6-month journey of, will I surrender? Will I let go? Will I do this? And I finally reached a point where I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll surrender. I'll tap out. I'll trade my dream in for God's dream. And during that time, Jeremiah 29:11 became such an important verse in my life when God was talking to his people. And he said, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to bless you, not to hurt you. Plans to give you hope and a future. And I held on to that verse with all my life. And 6 months after saying I would go into ministry, wrestling through the where, the when, the how, we got a call from a little church in southern Illinois, in Tupelo, Mississippi, and just felt from the first time we heard about that church that that's where we were supposed to go. And we started there in Easter of 1997. Leslie moved down with Zoe in June of 97, and we bought a house and planted our flag and put our roots down, and I survived 5 years there. Connected with great people who I stay in touch with and love to this day. Hello, Carlos and Lorena. But it was hard. It was hard. And I remember going to a conference, and I was in this small group. It was out at Rick Warren's church. I was in this small group, and I was kind of sharing my journey, and this guy said to me, man, you need to get your confidence back. You you need to, charge ahead and make things happen, and you need to get some confidence, man. You're like broken and useless, kind of was his attitude. And I smiled. I said, I appreciate that. I said, I've had confidence my entire life. There wasn't a thing that I knew I couldn't do if I set my mind to it. However, I got to tell you, this time, it feels like God is breaking me. And God is stripping away that confidence and that pride and that arrogance. And it feels like I'm in a season of Him reforming me and reshaping me and humbling me and breaking me. And I don't want to short circuit that. And I'm so glad I didn't. And as I shared a little bit yesterday, moved home in 2002 and then started talking about planting a church in New Kensington. And a few weeks before we started our preseason services, we weren't ready. We were going to get our butts kicked. We weren't ready. But just took that step, that next step, that next step, that next step. And we met out at Penn State, New Kensington, at their branch campus for the first 2 years. And then after that time ended, graciously, the Lord opened doors, and some very gracious people in New Kensington worked it out for us to meet in the former Alcoa Clubhouse, the former School of Nursing building that we lease from the hospital now. And we have been there in that building now for 13 years, 13 and a half. Well, with the pandemic, 13. So we, and I have to tell you, pastoring a church of 15 and a half years old, I'm so grateful that I traded in my dreams and surrendered them to the Lord's dreams. And I don't know what your journey is or what the Lord's calling you to do. I do know one thing. He's not calling all of us to pastor churches. Sesame Street taught me that. I am absolutely certain. So don't let my calling define your calling. But I do want to invite you to search your soul and just ask, am I running from what God's calling me to do? And if you are, I want to invite you to consider leaning into what He's calling you to do. With your occupation, with your life, with your hobbies, with your free time, with your part-time, with everything. I can't imagine my life doing anything else now. If I had to dive for golf balls now, the last couple years I dove a little bit here and there, 10 years ago, and every time I got in the water, the Spirit just whispered, you're wasting time, you're wasting time, you're wasting time, don't waste time, don't waste time. That haunted me. Be in the water 5 to 6 hours and the whole time feeling like I need to be somewhere else. That's when you know something's got to change. So I want to journey a little bit over the next few days on this notion of dreaming, calling, and it becoming a reality, and trusting God and following Him fully. So if I've shared some of that story before on here, I apologize for replicating it, but wanted to make sure that you understood my journey to where I am and what God has been up to. So let me pray for you, and we'll begin a great Thursday together. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you are intimately interested in our lives and that you do have plans for us that are good. And I pray, Lord, that each person here would trust you in that And Father, I pray that if they are serving and following and doing what you're calling them to do, I pray, Lord, that you would give them peace and joy and fulfillment. And Father, I pray that no one would leave where you have them to chase something else that isn't your will. And I pray, Lord, that you would bless each person here today. Hold them close to you. And may they sense your joy and your pleasure throughout their day. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, Friday morning, tomorrow. Woohoo! And great to be with you. God bless.